You're listening to Errol Parker and Clancy Overall, editors of the Batuta Advocate, on Desert Rock FM. Welcome back to the Batuta Advocate radio show, recording live here from the Diamantina Shire. You've got myself, Clancy Overall, flanked by the Eternal Cadet, Wendell Hussey. How are you, Wendell?
Yeah, good, mate, good. Always happy to be here as the Eternal Cadet. That's what you got to do, I think. So, yeah, good to be with you and excited to talk to today's guest. Done all sorts, so...
Yeah, no, he's someone we've had our eye on for a while and someone we share a lot of mutual friends with. Obviously, as a South Sydney lad, he can't be out here with us, so he's zooming in, and sound quality sounds good. They must have got the NBN there in Maroubra. Thank you for joining us today, Macario De Souza, Kid Mac, some might know him as.
Thanks for having me, boys. Looking forward to it.
We're here talking to you today because you've got a film in cinemas as we speak, and it's about to hit Paramount Plus. It's an interesting film that you've put together here coming out of the pandemic. It's a coming of age story, you know, about young Australian kids facing those coming of age moments through the vehicle of music festivals. I want to kind of talk to you about this film. I want to talk to you about how friendship and these themes kind of weave in between all the work you've done over the years. Is that a beach thing that you see this? Is that a puberty's blues thing that you guys you're more aware of it than anyone else in the world, I guess, coastal communities, about, you know, that difference between teenager and adult?
Look, I think it's, I've been obsessed with coming of age films at a young age, you know. I think growing up in Maroubra, certainly, you know, we weren't short of colourful characters and experiences, so I felt I was in a unique position to tap into a lot of those experiences to tell a story like this. I guess you could say it sort of sits in that realm of puberty blues, but definitely a lot more gritty and from the streets.
What was the inspiration behind this 6 festivals idea? Obviously, it's coincided, as we said, coming out of the pandemic, and festivals are back on, so it's got that good feel to it. But what was kind of the inspiration or the drive behind making this one?
It really was just my experiences as a touring artist for over 10 years. You know, my friends and I were obsessed with festivals from the first ones that we used to just jump the fence to and have a great time because we couldn't afford the tickets to, and then, you know, watching other artists having a time of their lives, commanding a sea audience is something that inspired me to become an artist. And then, you know, started getting my first festival slots, playing in that brutal 12 p.m. slot where no one was there except for 10 of my mates, all off their heads, and having a good time, and then worked my way through the ranks and played some of the best shows and festivals in the country and around the world. And you know, throwing a story of teenagers growing up and all the growing pains and dealing with a lost one or not dealing with it into that euphoric world of festivals, I just felt it was a super unique concept to a film. And I come from a documentary background. This is my first narrative script drama. So they say, write what you know. And I've tried to tap into something that was I knew like the back of my hand and also was going to be a unique selling point. So that's kind of where it all boiled down to, yeah.
Yeah, and there's that documentary element of it in terms of the festival sets and the music sets and everything that we see there. How much did you decide to lean into that?
Yeah, my non-negotiable when pitching this was that it had to be shot at real music festivals, which, you know, a lot of the investors and everyone just freaked out at because it's challenging. No one does that. They build sets, they hire extras, but you just can't cheat thousands of people jumping up and down to, you know, some of the greatest bands in Australia. And I wanted to tap into my network of friends, of artists that I've been touring with for years who are still touring, and have them play themselves on stage and a bit of backstage just to give it that realness. And I feel like a lot of music films fall short because they tend to be a little bit cheesy. Yep. You know, whether they're written and made by people who aren't necessarily from that culture, or they get the opportunity to make a film later in life and try to reminisce when they were younger and just miss the mark a little bit. So I felt like, you know, being in that unique position of still having my finger on the pulse and coming from that world, we could make it as raw and bring my documentary flavour to it.
As a filmmaker, as a documentary maker, Mac, you, as you said, you've got a unique finger on the pulse for music, and, you know, from your authentic experiences in that world. But just in general, I guess your upbringing and, you know, the community you come out of gives you a good insight into a vaster kind of net of Australia compared to most filmmakers, particularly. You know, Maroubra is a multicultural kind of area. It has an element that reminds you a lot of the western suburbs, and you've got that multiculturalism and egalitarianism, but you're also close enough to the city, and you're technically in the eastern suburbs, so you get to see a bit of the wealth as well of Sydney City. Do you find that when you're having these discussions with people in the industry that actually sometimes you've got to remind yourself that you know this world better than a lot of people sitting in offices that are kind of trying to put something together that people will like?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think for the most part, sometimes I felt, I guess, out of place in these meetings, full of suits coming from where I come from. But at the same time, and only now, I'm starting to realize that I have a unique voice. And growing up where I grew up, you're right. We had everything from the houses to the multiculturalisms to the, multi-million-dollar mansions across the road. We had the influence of like the urban sort of cityscape and a lot of bikey influence. And then we had the beach culture. And it was just this crazy melting pot that is pretty unique to Australia, and not many other places, in Australia has that. So growing up, we didn't know any better, but looking back, it's like it's a filmmaker's dream to have grown up in that, with so many inspirational kind of experiences, and wild stories and characters. But I think there is a bit of a shift in the industry where, the suits and understanding that these voices, they're a great representation of subcultures in Australia, and they need to be supported and be treated as the expert to bring those stories to life. Because if you think about Australian cinema, there's been a lot of typical white bread privileged type stories for so long, and just like hip hop in Australia, things are shifting. We never had. It was always like they called it barbecue rap for years, where it was a lot of Anglo guys just rapping. And nowadays, in the last, I'd say 6 years or so, there's been this amazing influx of like Pacific Islanders and like Asian and African rappers coming out of Australia, just making beautiful international hip hop music. I think the same thing's happening in the film scene now, where they're allowing us more textured skin type, like roughies from, stranger parts of the world to tell our stories. But yeah, it's exciting.
Sydney has always known Maroubra, I guess. Anyone from New South Wales have known Maroubra. It's always beautiful beach with a rougher edge to it. Some people love that, and some people steer clear of that. You, though, in your work and in the documentary you put together, Bra Boys, you took that to, Maroubra became a household name. How did it feel, as I mentioned before we recorded, we've interviewed Rennie Matur, a former Dogs of War NRL player. We've interviewed Richie Vass, former big wave surfer, UFC fighter. I mean, and it's for good reason that Maroubra and the Bra Boys and, the greater community are such an interesting kind of conversation in Australia and particularly in Sydney. But how does it feel with what you've done and taking that to the world, having everyone obsessing over Maroubra, having everyone, you had kids in schools in North Queensland that knew about the Bra Boys and everything that had happened there and the way of life down there. Do you feel like, did it feel like at one point everyone was looking at you?
Yeah, definitely. It was weird. Like, as a filmmaker, it was incredible to have, such a platform to launch my career and have someone like a Russell Crowe, who narrated the documentary, get involved and take me under the wing for years. As a young man, it was a different story. I was frothing on the attention, to be honest. It was like we released the film and a lot of us went over to LA to launch the film in the US, and we partied in LA for like 6 months with some of the biggest celebrities and just lapped it right up. And when I should have been pitching my next idea, but fucked that one up. And basically, on the flip side, there was a lot of young crew all over the country just almost taking the wrong messages out of the film and trying to be tough guys and get into fights, and thought it was cool to get arrested and do stints in and out of jail. Like, I can only speak for myself, but we've got a big crew of Bra Boys that we sometimes we come from different places, different homes, and have somewhat different beliefs. But for me, part of the reason of my follow-up film, Fighting Fear, which was about Mark Matthews and Richie Vass, was trying to correct some of those themes that I felt was misunderstood by young crew around the country. And just, I guess, as I matured as a young man and a filmmaker, I try to put that into the next film, because I was just hearing some pretty horrific stories. And at the same time, I was touring as Kid Mac, and I'd be on the pisser before a show or after a show, and some bloke blind drunk would come up behind me and just yell out, going, "Yeah, fucking Bra Boys, fuck the police, and let's bash some dogs." And it was the wrong thing. I was just like, that's not what we made it for. But all in all, man, it was a global sensation, and for that, I'm definitely grateful.
Yeah, you're right in the sense that a lot of people kind of squeezed the fruit that was your documentary and started to really enjoy the pulp. The idea that, you know, postcode tattoos in coastal towns, even coastal towns that aren't hard, by the way. Port Macquarie, you have no business, anyone from Port Macquarie getting Old English postcode tats. And then, of course, you get the River Boys in Home and Away, and you get like, you have this serious thread in Australian culture where, I mean, what you did do was identify something that happens in beach communities and whether or not it ramped up after you guys gave it a voice or not. That's for those towns to point the finger at that. But I want to know, what is in the water in Maroubra? What's going on? I mean, I look at the Bra Boys and I look at, you know, predominantly housing commission kids, all from different walks of life, all with different last names, you know, from De Souza to Vasilik, you know, to Matua, to all kinds of names. Abaddon. What is it, do you think, that kind of sent you guys outside of the beach? Be that through sport or through film or through, you know, anything. There'd be well-known Bra Boys that actually don't even do anything. Just people know them around Sydney.
Yeah, look, I think it was the culture in the community that stemmed back from, you know, the 70s of the surf culture, and that really was a culture of out-fight, out-root, out-party your mate, and that sort of just escalated and got implemented into all avenues of life. And for me personally, my best mates in my generation, like Rennie and Mark and Rich, you know, we had, say, Kobe Abaddon, Sonny Abaddon, Joe Abaddon, those the Abaddon brothers, particularly Kobe. You know, he really made a name for himself in the big wave surfing and made a career out of it. And we saw how he lived his life, and he'd just be away for 10 months of the year on surfing contests and whatnot, come back. And that was kind of nice to see that you could, you know, make something out of something. And from where we came from, everyone came from no money, came from very humble beginnings. And, you know, just seeing our parents struggle to keep the lights on, those kind of things just, I guess, feed into that want and that drive to, like, get out of the hood, stay out of the hood, you know. And that could either end up in a way that was negative if you didn't channel it right, or, you know, there was this friendly competition. Like Rennie would make it to first grade, John Sutton, you know, would lift the trophy for the bunnies, and when Richie cracked it into the UFC, these are all things that, like, are within your immediate best friend circle, and only, like, pushes you to want to excel. So there was this element of, like, friendly competition and constant support. So I think a combination of all those things just got us to where we are, and a few of us have made the most of it.
Huge sporting and surfing element to it. I wanted to know how your journey into filmmaking started, you know, all the way back to the start. How did you fall in love with wanting to make documentaries, make films, to document stuff?
Probably because I was a shit surfer compared to my mates. And no, I had some of the best surfers out of my mates, and I used to love surf movies back in the day from guys like Taylor Steele, and they were like just best surf action, amazing soundtracks to them. And my sister had gone away to America once and came back with this little camcorder, and I must have been 15 or something, and she would leave the house and leave that camcorder, and I'd say, don't touch my camera, and first thing I'd do is grab it, run, and then go down the beach and just film my mates surfing. And after a session, you know, we'd film some parties in between, and I'd just put all footage together and make some beats up for it, put it together, and we have, like, kick back and have a bit of a screening with all the boys, and I always have a laugh. And I kind of love that idea of, you know, going away, putting something together, and then having this moment where you exhibit something and you get a reaction. It's quite addictive. And that to me was my wave chasing, or my training for a fight type thing. And I was always creative, and I guess I felt like I finally found my little outlet. So that's kind of where it started. And then just kept taking a camera everywhere with me, learning the craft of editing. You know, I was obsessed with music. So, like, music production, it all kind of bundled in. It wasn't until after school where I kind of went to uni and did a fine arts degree, mastered in sort of, you know, film and music, and started my, I guess, the Bra Boys doco at that point. It was like a major work in one of the years that I had, and became the pilot that went on to make the film. So everything just kind of, like, one thing led to the other, and it all kind of started just from shooting my mate surfing.
Fair enough. How did you balance those two worlds, from Bra Boys to fine arts degree at university? What was it like walking between those two while that was happening?
Did everyone back you?
My close mates did. I think I was a little bit against the grain of your stock standard, bra boy on paper, I guess. And luckily, I had a staunch older sister, two older sisters. My elder sister, Glenda, in particular, would always push me into going to uni, getting a degree, regardless of anything else I was doing. So I kind of listened to her a lot, which was a great voice to have. I think I was at that time the first bra boy to get a degree, and since then we've had a whole bunch, which is great. I hated uni at the start. I thought, fuck, this is whack. I should be surfing. I should be with the boys, and that mentality was everything that I try and tell young people to avoid now, because it was so easy to just follow the pack and do your own, just stay with the crew. But I stuck to it, and never really gelled with a lot of the people at uni. We were just different walks of life. But I guess now that I'm starting to find my own little crew and units with the world of filmmaking, and I tend to connect more with other filmmakers who come from a similar background to me and telling similar stories.
When we were interviewing Richie Vass, one of the questions we asked him was, how come everyone in Maroubra knows how to punch on more so than any other beach town? And it was of an anecdote. I remember first time in King's Cross, seeing all the different walks of life down there, all the different kind of tough guys and party guys. And I remember seeing a big group of Maroubra lads in a pub, thinking, actually, there's a presence here. These guys aren't dressed like gangsters; they're dressed like surfies. But for whatever reason, there was a feeling that actually these guys were probably some of the most rough and ready in the entire precinct of King's Cross. We asked Richie Vass that question, and he actually put it down to the Brazilians arriving in Maroubra and bringing with them, the Brazilian boxing gyms and that kind of stuff, and how the multiculturalism really kind of forged a greater identity, a greater kind of monoculture within the multiculturalism. Did you find that in your day-to-day? And do you find that with that brand, Bra Boys, Rennie said to us as well, some people have their own idea about what that is. But do you find, you guys have the opportunity to take all of these different cultures with you, be that to become an incredible street fighter or an incredible filmmaker?
Yeah, I think Richie probably nailed it on the head. I think pre the Brazilians landing in Maroubra, we had a lot of incredible professional boxers, some of the older boys, Ronnie Reardon, Nate Rogers. There's a lot of when we were young, we used to always go to Kobe's grandma's backyard and hit the pads, and it doesn't matter how big or small or terrible of a fighter you were, you always got paired up with someone and you had to spar in front of everyone. And that was a bit of a coming of age thing where one day you just get belted and it just make you want to go back and try and show that you're improving. And I think there was this looseness of just brawlers and street fighters and whatnot, and I think when the Brazilians did come in, that whole jiu-jitsu thing, they sort of put parameters to that machoism and put a bit of a routine and a structure to it, where all of a sudden these brawlers became quietly confident guys who knew they could handle most situations, so there was no need to be overly aggressive unless things came to us, sort of thing. So yeah. I think there was that, and I think a lot of that teaches you to be a man, just having that confidence to know that you can handle yourself in situations is probably pretty important growing up, particularly in areas like Maroubra. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I just think that also starts to then play out in whatever avenue that you're into, particularly in the creative world. It's a whole world away, but it's just how we were raised, I guess.
I want to talk about your family's story in Maroubra. Were you part of that wave?
I think my parents were part of the earlier South American influx in the 70s.
Yep.
There was a lot of South Americans coming around that time, and they all wanted to be in and around the coast. My parents, so funny how immigrants think there's an opportunity to buy a cheap, old, a street away from the water because all the other South Americans are there, and they chose there. And just years later, you'd go to find out what they missed out on. But that's what happened.
Yeah, every family's got that story.
Yeah. I think it's, the idea of just wanting to remain within your community while transitioning into a whole new culture. And then, the Brazilians that came later, it was nice to see because I hadn't really seen my own kind in Maroubra for years. And it wasn't until I think the boys started coming through in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And it was nice to see because it just meant I felt a little more kind of less in no man's land and more a part of like this beautiful kind of crossbreed of cultures in Maroubra.
Now, we go back to you finally put a camera on this thing, Maroubra, Bra Boys. You showcase it as a major work at university. Where did Russell Crowe come into the mix? Was that a South Sydney Rabbitohs hookup, or because having, obviously the narration of Russell Crowe didn't improve the film you'd made, but it certainly added some flair to it. We're talking about The Gladiator here.
Yeah, absolutely. It was the same time that Russell Crowe, Peter Holmescourt were taking over the South Sydney Rabbitohs when we were towards the back end of finishing the film. John Sutton was cracking it in the first grade, and via Sut, Russell had heard about the Bra Boys documentary. I think he'd seen maybe an Australian story on the Abbotons and was interested. And yeah, via Sut tried to reach out, and there was a couple of phone calls that we copped from Russell, and we thought it was one of the older boys pranking us, so we'd always hang up. And and then Sut was the one that told us, hey, Russell's been trying to get a hold of you to have a chat. And long story short, we set up a meeting, set up a screening of a rough cut, and we had a temporary narrator on it, which was just a temp voice, no name, and he made a comment on how bad the narrator was, but he thought that the film was great. And we said, well, why would you lend your voice to it? And he said yes. And I think, back then, Russell's a strategic man. He probably was seeing this documentary as a possible film that he could turn into a scripted drama as his directional debut. Russell, coming from, those humble working class beginnings as well, was looking for something that was gritty and, in tone with what he's all about. And coming from that South Sydney world, it all sort of made sense. So yeah, he definitely elevated it, took it to another level. There was a lot of avenues that were opened up because of his connections. And I think it was a big reason why the film ended up becoming one of the highest grossing docos in Australian history. I mean,
I'll always remember the green and red Armani suits that he took the Rabbitohs to the premiere in on the red carpet. That was, that might even been the first time an NRL team went to a premiere of anything.
Yeah, he's just always thinking outside the box. A whole bus just pulled up in the middle of Market Street, State Theatre in the city. Whole squad got out, Armani suits, red and green, and it definitely it made a splash. That's for sure. He knows how to make a splash when he wants to. So then
you've got that under your belt. Incredible debut. You've got Kid Mac. You're touring, as you said, starting with the midnight slots, where basically your main audience is the subjects of a documentary you've just made. That Kid Mac has been, a DNA between all your work, I guess, as a performing touring artist. You make another documentary about the boys with Richie. And then where did you find yourself saying, okay, scripted narrative, 6 festivals?
So after Fighting Fear, which was, a great follow-up, we were able to sort of start to get some accolades and win some actor awards, which was great. At the time, I was getting a lot of commercial work. I was doing a lot of work with artists, record labels, music videos, international acts, local acts, and the work was coming in thick and fast where I had to set up a production company and build a team around that, and that's what we did for years. And that idea of having a production company, we were doing a lot of work with music festivals, shooting a lot of the content, docos, and I was just really keen to leap over to drama. And it's just not an easy thing that you can just decide, hey, I want to do drama and off you go. It's you start at the back of the line again, and the meetings you're having with funders and distributors, you become the new kid again. And I really had to prove myself. So I put my own money into just shooting a proof of concept on a short version of 6 festivals. And I never really backed myself as a writer to start with as far as scripts go, because I'd never really done a feature script. I'd always written shorter stuff and was working with co-writers to get it to a point, and then realized that this world I was writing was my world and the voices were mine. And so I sort of, for the next 10 drafts, just grabbed the bull by the horns and finished the script, and people started really liking the script. And this was over a 3-year period. And then we finally got Screen Australia on board, who's, Australia's government body that taxpayers' money gets allocated to films that people they feel need to be heard. And we got a $500,000 grant from Screen Australia, which then triggered a lot of other state agencies to pique their interest and see what this was all about. We got a record label on board in Sony Music who wanted to utilise some of their roster on our film.
Of course.
The festivals were excited. And then the final piece of the puzzle was Paramount Plus. Obviously, we had stoppages of like bushfires, floods, and then the pandemic, which, as painful as they were, the silver lining was it slowed things down and allowed more people to wait, catch up, and hear about this project. And Paramount Plus was one of those. So I went in to pitch to Paramount Plus. It was barely 20 minutes into my pitch, and we'd done a deal there and then, and they were psyched on it. They wanted the global rights, which was amazing. It just meant that everyone was actually we're going to have a proper budget to make this film, and we got into production 2020, but pandemic slowed us down. So it's been a couple of years of a hard slog.
Can you tell me, you said non-negotiable was filming in music festivals. Where have you managed to do that in the last 3 years?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, man. It was like, we were 2019, we were ready to shoot. And at the time, we had a couple of festival partners that just had to get dropped because the government in New South Wales were waging war against drugs. There was a few ODs happening at festivals that essentially was making it hard for festivals to run. They were making them have extra police presence and all sorts of parameters that just meant they couldn't run anymore. So then 2019 we went to shoot Lost Paradise, and then that was cancelled because of the bushfires. And then we had a replacement a couple of months later that was flooded. It was cancelled. And then the pandemic hit, so we had lockdowns. Jeez. And it just seemed like this film wasn't going to get made. And then there's a couple of Queensland festivals that looked like they were going to run in between a couple of the lockdowns. So it just meant trying to look at different locations to get our festival stuff first. So it really was just finding little pockets where festivals were running, grabbing that content first, and then trying to work out the rest of the puzzle later.
What a process. I just wanted to ask about the actors and actresses you've got in here. How involved were you in finding these guys? Because I notice some of them come from festival areas. Yaz, who plays Summer, from Byron Bay, and then we've got Razzie King, who plays Maxie, born in Mullum.
They're all familiar, like a lot of these names, with that kind of culture. Were you involved in the casting?
Absolutely, because this was my baby. I kind of was, super hands-on, almost micromanaging, and I've got pretty intense OCD that this was next level when it came to casting. So I casted Rasmus King first. I found him through our surfing network. Someone had told me about him. I wanted to cast Maxie and Kane, two brothers in the film, as real brothers in real life. And Rasmus has got an older brother, Caius, both professional surfers, never acted before, but had amazing, hilarious, charming content on their Instagram that I thought they had the spark. They definitely had that star quality. And after working with them closely, knew that I could get what I needed out of those guys, and then built the rest of the cast around them through our casting agent. They found me Yasmin, who plays Summer, incredible singer. She had this quirk about her that was very similar to Summer in my mind. And then James was played by a kid called Rory Potter, who had been in the Dressmaker and does a lot of theatre and was just a real likeable, warm dude. And then lastly, we had Gayala Bales from Brisbane, who's an incredible Indigenous poet, activist, model. I tried so many different Marlies for that role, and for whatever reason they fell through, didn't feel right. And at the 11th hour, I'd seen, I think it was in A Strange Story on Quaden, her brother Quaden, and saw her interview, and she just popped on screen. She was super eloquent, and when I researched her, I saw that she was a poet. She was great with words. She's clearly connected to that urban culture, and the role is an up-and-coming female rapper. And after talking to her a few times, I knew she had that star quality too. And she was probably the fastest learner out of everyone. I'd write songs for her. Within 2 hours, she'd have them down. The next day, she'd have them perfected. And the day after that, she had to perform them in front of thousands of people at a real festival. So, she was quick, and she's got a massive future ahead of her. Caius, on the other hand, not on the other hand, but I should say, he was the furthest removed from his personality. He played like this Eshe lad, kind of drug-dealing fuckwit brother, who also surfed, again, pulling from characters from Maroubra. And it's fun.
I feel like you might have met him before.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, after the premiere, a lot of my mates, the boys came up to me and just go, "Mate, Kane, that character is so on point. Like, he just felt like one of the boys down the beach, And so he's such a lovely dude and real lovely to his brother, and he was the furthest progressed from his real personality. So I think that balance of where they all came from and what they brought was cool, because it wasn't all polished, glossy actors who had, trained and not understanding of this world. But you had the brothers who were also, rough around the edges, grew up in the surf community. So I just wanted that roughness as well, and not too polished.
That must be exciting for you as well. Obviously, it's your debut for a big drama thing like this, but giving all of these kids a start and helping them build up their careers, that must be an exciting part of it too.
Yeah, I reckon, man. I've always been frothing on, just scoping out talent, whether it's in music, whether it's, in acting. I tend to take a bit of pride in that. And these kids have, I should say, young people have such a big future ahead of them. And yeah, I reckon like Ras, for example, we know he's done 2 films in the same time. Both are coming out to cinemas this month. The other film is called Bosch and Rocket with Luke Hemsworth and Isabel Lucas. And I just think he's the next little Heath Ledger in the making. And to be a part of the start of these guys' careers, to see where they go to, it's part of it's exciting, man. I can't wait to see what they do.
I mean, in your field, there's a lot of time spent in front of a camera or behind a camera, and a lot of time spent in front of a screen, you know? So much of that is done in dark rooms. How do you now transition into, you know, this new kind of responsibility and this new kind of role you play? Once upon a time, you were the documenter, you know, you were transcribing and you were capturing something and then delivering it without getting too involved in what's going on in front of the camera. Now you're actually moving into the role of kind of man management, you know, almost coaching. How do you go with, you know, particularly young kids with their own shit going on? Who knows what's going on in their lives? I know the kids. I know you didn't like to use the word kids before, but I looked back to Splendor in the Grass and I was thinking these kids have had a rough couple years. You know, their formative years are spent in, you know, they missed out on schoolies, they missed out on their school formals, they missed out on all this shit. So the kids right now, be it those ones that were sloshing in the mud at Splendor in the Grass, or was it those ones that you had, you know, on set, have had very different kind of crucial formative years than what any of us can remember. How was it, you know, not only these actors you've got coming into this world of being on screen, but they're also coming out of this bizarre couple of years?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. There's been a certain generation who have missed out on music festivals completely for the last 3 or 4 years. These kids were a part of that generation, so they were experiencing festivals for the first time while we were shooting the film. So half the time it was hard to keep their focus and attention because they were just, you know, wide-eyed and starry-eyed with meeting all the artists and just getting in the mosh and just loving it. But man, they're so professional and switched on that they you know, got the job done. And then any time we sort of wrapped for the day, you'd have to just be careful because you'd lose them in the crowd and they just want to go and party. So, but I don't know. I think for me, I've had some great mentors in my life, and I've just pinched, you know, different traits from those mentors that have worked well with me when I was young, and try to implement that with younger kids that I work with. I think mentors and mentorship is such an important part of growing up, and I think you know, for those who have lived interesting lives like most of us, I think it's only fair to give back and teach them the ways that, or right from wrong, or at least show them the opportunities that you wish you had.
Well, we look forward to it, mate. 6 festivals, as we said, in cinemas now and soon to land on Paramount Plus. Congratulations, Mac. Sounds like you've had a bit of fun. Fairly stressful time, but a fairly fun time putting this all together. And we hope to hear more from you and see more from you.
Excited to see what's next.
Thanks, boys. Appreciate you having me. It's been fun.